Hello everyone, I'm Jason Chua, and I made these lower thirds. I feel lower thirds should be as simple as possible and take up as little of the screen as possible while still getting the message across. In this case, I used a two-line name and title position. Previously, lower thirds had a fixed width, and I don't see that as the case anymore. Using some scripts, I'm able to dynamically resize the lower thirds so that they take up as little space as possible. So they look just about fine. It automatically adjusts to the size of the text that's in the box. But let's say you want to be even longer than this. This is already pretty long, but let's say you have somebody with a really long name. I get it. Maybe, or maybe you're not using it for a name. Maybe you're using it for a title of a place or a location, which is perfectly fine too. If you make it even longer, it compresses the text. Just makes it longer or shorter. It'll keep trying, but it won't go all the way. For example, if I keep typing, it'll give me the error loader too long, which means it's probably not going to look good on the broadcast. So it'll stop you from doing that also. And of course, the same thing applies to this, to the lower bar. Keep typing until eventually it errors out as well. This is all accomplished in plain old After Effects. Just expressions, no third-party plugins or anything. Just good old vanilla expressions. Stay tuned for a line-by-line of how this all works. You made it this far, that means you're kind of curious to how this all works. To explain how this all works, I'm just going to start off with the name. Let me shy the layers that are not necessary. I went ahead and locked the layers that you shouldn't be editing. This is more to prevent me from accidentally messing up things, but it also prevents it from being editable in Premiere Pro when you're using the dynamic text feature, which kind of works most of the time. More on that. So this is how it all works. So this is it in all of its glory. It starts off with what I call a brain layer. A brain layer contains all the effect controls. I wanted to abstract this as much as possible so that it would be easier to add maybe a third line if I needed to really quickly. I define a few things, in this case the source, which is the actual layer you're editing. I'm going to go ahead and lock this bottom text layer. So this text layer up here is on top of the other text layer, in this case named CC, and when you edit this, it just edits the one on top and bottom. Name CC will go ahead and look at name as defined by the brain, and I'll use this magical function called source rect at time, and I'll give it the dimensions. In this case, I'm looking for the width of the layer up top, and then it'll compare. If it's beyond what I call the target size, or no, for this one I use hard limit. If it's beyond what I call the clip size, it'll give you the error whoa there too long. Otherwise, it'll just equal the text. The scaling is where it gets a bit more fancy. Basically, this looks at the target size and the size of the brain, and it calculates what the scale should be if this is as such. So if I go ahead and type a bunch here, notice the X scale is now less than 100, like it should be. This is because source rect at time ignores scale when it's measuring. I went ahead and put in 2 seconds at the end of all the source rects at time so that I get a nice constant thing, because this source rect at time takes a time input, but I just use 2 seconds because I'm not dealing with anything moving. At least not in this case. So basically it determines the percent of change that it needs to undergo, and then takes that and subtracts it from 100, and that's what it equals. I always just keep the vertical scale at 100 because that's pretty much all you need. The other layers are here because I really wanted this cool masking effect. For example, right here, the text is coming in with this gray layer on broadcast white, silver. gray. We're just going to stick with gray. So it comes in at that gray layer. It just keeps going along and along. And because of that, I needed to do a couple of fancy maskings. So I start off with this box, name mask. What this does is what name mask does is it looks at the name layer up here and just makes it that width. This is name mask. It all starts with name mask. It looks at name CC, which is the adjusted text layer, and it finds the width of that. So whatever the width of it, it can never be longer than the clip size or the target size, and it just does that. And so now it's that width. On top of that, I have this mask, which is what masks out the text as it comes in. So that's just a few seconds behind the first gray. A bar up there, black bar. And behind that I have just the normal backing masked off to the shape layer as well. And all that combined is how lower thirds work. They don't take that long to render. I have a feeling it's mostly this logo that's taking up most of the time. I gotta compress that down, maybe to a nice proper image sequence, probably. The beauty of this one is as soon as it hits the 2-second mark, it just renders all the way. So it just goes ahead, because after this, we don't animate out our lower thirds. It's too cumbersome to do in Premiere Pro. It already is cumbersome to do an animated in, to have them animated at all even. It was a wonder that. So that's why. I know some editors get fancy and they just play the clip backwards to get it to animate out, but it's not personally something I do. I just fade out or cut out. So now if I edit it again, oh dear, this is why we keep that layer locked. Let's unshy. Nope. Nope. Have to view that name. So that's me again. And now let's go ahead and bring it into Premiere Pro. So I'm gonna go ahead and import the project I was just working on. Okay, there's my composition. Just gonna drag it on there and scrub around until it shows up. There it is. So I'm gonna go over here to effects controls, where hopefully I can change all this. So I'm gonna make myself a royalty now. I'm just gonna add up the Southern Isles to the back of it, to the end of that. And hopefully with a little bit of luck, this should, in theory, update. The problem is it's a bit wonky. Like, by a bit, I mean really, really wonky. It's almost unusable. And then, even if I set like a sane out point, I render this much. So now that it's done rendering, if I go ahead and play it, it's glitching out. And this is not good. This is no good. So, I'll figure this out eventually. But yeah. That's for 2017 update. That's all for today.